Some say Winston Churchill was inordinately close to his mother. The man sitting across from me has met with presidents of the United States. He's a seasoned veteran journalist. He's Stanford Erickson. He has written the book Mama's Boy Presidents. Why do we keep electing them? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. Nice to be with the mayor.
Yes, you know the mayor. You listen to the show, and yet this is the first time meeting you?
I'm sorry.
How long have you been here?
We've owned the house here for 5 years, and the last year I had to write the book, so I quit what I was doing. I just stayed here for the last year, and we're residents, full-time residents. We have a home somewhere else. But
I'd like to place myself under the umbrella of your tutelage, please. I'm not a journalist. I just fell into this whole thing as an entertainer, and so I have great respect and reverence for you. I want to ask you this before we get into the book. Where do you think we're going? You know, we can't seem to trust our journalists like we once did to be impartial.
I agree with that. And journalism changed after Watergate. With Watergate, people came into journalism that should have gone into movies. And they would be working for you, and you'd make an assignment. They would cover the assignment, and they wouldn't call in the story. They did not want to write the story. Journalists in the past had to write. When you have to write, when you have to put words on a page, you have to think. You have to integrate that into what you think. When you just can talk, you don't have to think as much. And so we got entertainers, and they wanted to be the stars of the rather than report on what was happening, they wanted to be the stars of it. So that's what happened to journalism. In the past, journalists reported. We didn't want to be the stars. We sought truth and accuracy. And that was important for a journalist. Today, truth and accuracy is not so important. They seem to take sides, and that's not the role of a journalist.
I can say with complete candidness and honesty, and I met Brian Williams last year, and I'd really like to wring his neck because I saw this with my own eyes. This isn't some malarkey coming from some alarmist. Okay, when I keep wanting to call him Reagan, when what's his name was running, the guy I interviewed, the guy just lost the president,
Romney.
Romney. When he was running, he said one night he said, I'm not concerned with the poor because there's a safety net for them. If there isn't, I will create it. So help me God. 3 times after they played, it might have been a few days later, then they played it a week later, then maybe 2 weeks later, they quoted him as saying, I'm not concerned with the poor. And they cut the video right there. He didn't say I'm not. He said, I'm not concerned with the poor because they have a safety net. If they don't, I'll make sure they do. And that's NBC, who I've trusted with my heart. And, you know, it really just irks me. And I saw that with my own 2 eyes.
Well, I think Scott Paley now is perhaps of all the anchors, the most prepared and the one that is trying to be less biased.
Where is he?
He's with CBS. So I think he's on 60 Minutes. That's my feeling in terms. But
well, I record that. I TV that every night. That's Diane Sawyer, who I also met on Martha's Vineyard.
No, Diane Sawyer is ABC. But
you got me. I'm wrong. Okay.
Not at all. But
corrected.
But I was in the White House covering the presidency, President Ford, when Brian Williams was the White House correspondent. And they picked him, the television people picked him because he's over 6 feet tall, had sharp elbows. And the television, as you know, you have to get close to your subject. So they would knock all the print journalists out of the way so they could be close to the journalists. So Dan Rather and Williams were in the White House, and you could see that they wanted to be the star. They were on television. Dan Rather even said to President Nixon, he took President Nixon on. No journalist ever did that before Dan Rather. So this need, this compulsion to be the center of attention rather than the subject has hurt journalism.
Because I will say this, Stanford, there's one thing I've learned. No, I was not prepared for this at all. I was a musician who was on a radio show, and they said, hey, they called me in the next day and said, you have personality. Would you like to be on radio? So this whole thing is backwards. But in 19 years, I'm learning more and more. You know, it's funny. I'll get letters that people say you interrupt too much, and then I'll get letters that say you don't interrupt enough because it's supposed to be a back and forth thing. But I've learned. Hopefully I'm learning and becoming a better guy for the radio. Over 19 years is really the less I say and the more that my guest says, like you, the better the show.
I was raised with Jack Parr, and I thought Jack Parr had that unique ability to talk and be vulnerable to get other people vulnerable to talk. And I think that's your ability to.
That's my ploy.
That's your ploy.
I'll
Because
open up, like I'll talk with you about knowing FDR. His wife sold Christmas trees to my grandmother to get to my mother for you to open up and tell me something. Now the sad news is for the poor guy that lives in Vero Beach who hears my show, is I've heard that story 500 times. Why is it?
Well, it's very important in the interchange. I also think, which you have, the best journalists are non-judgmental. There for the grace of God go I. And you can interview people if they can feel viscerally that you're non-judgmental. And I think you have that ability. The best reporters always have that ability. People tell me everything. I have to be careful what I repeat because people tell me things because I'm non-judgmental. Because I do know I could have done that.
But others will read what you write or what I say or report on, and then they are great judgers.
Yes, that's the nature of human beings.
I've been through the vicissitudes of life, which make for poise and power and graciousness and a merciful heart.
You've said it so well, and I agree with that. And I think the greatest presidents, like Abraham Lincoln, and I believe Ronald Reagan was one, had that graciousness, that humility, that they knew their limitations, and they wanted to be useful to their creator.
Isn't it true? Would you agree with this? When Solomon wrote humilities before riches, honor, and life, it's very profound and very true.
Well, my first book was How to Be Wiser Than King Solomon. And yes, so I studied Solomon because I was always interested in wisdom. And really, the seed of that book created this book, because when I was writing that and I was doing a biography of King Solomon and King David, I found that King David was a daddy's boy and Solomon was a mama's boy. David created the kingdom, Solomon destroyed it. So the mama's boy, sometimes they want to be the center of attention, and so they take over rather than having the kingdom take over. They're not working for the kingdom starts working for them. And that's why you have to be careful with when we keep electing these mama's boys. What's extraordinary about our nation starts to be diminished because they want to take care of everyone. They want to be the center of attention. They want to be the secular Messiah, and they end up doing damage.
The secular Messiah, maybe that'd be the title of your next book. Secular Messiah. You're right. Romney would have been tough, and people didn't want that. I mean, I had two boys that sat right in the seats where we are here right a few days after the election. And, they said, I said, well, we didn't vote for Romney. I said, why not? And I said, is it because you're dark-skinned? And they said, no, because the one boy said, he was going to take away all our money that my mama gets for, whatever, disability, whatever. And then the other one corrected him, said, Romney wasn't going to take it all away, but a lot of it, And no one wanted those cuts. And, of course, Russia's been, over the airwaves saying we elected Santa Claus.
Well, I've been, as journalist and in PR all over the world, and if you've been there, and I've been in the service, in the Army, you start to understand how extraordinary this nation is. And you don't want us to be a Europe. You don't want us to be an Asia. You don't want that. What you want is, I'm a poor boy, I'm son of a farmer. You want the ability so that...
That's you, in fact?
Yes, I'm son of a farmer, poor boy, went to Berkeley public school, got in because of my SATs more than anything else, $79 a semester to go to Berkeley. But it gave me the opportunity in this extraordinary society to raise myself. Not to where I wanted, but at least it gave me the opportunity. And journalism, the nice thing about journalism, it's a meritocracy, just like what you're doing is a meritocracy. If no one listens to you, you don't exist. If I write and no one reads me, I don't exist. And that's the kind of meritocracy I like. Nothing's wrong with that. You just want the opportunity. You can't want the outcome. In Europe, I have a good friend who's a play director. Every 7 years he gets to direct one play because he's in a union, and he gets every 7 years. Yes. Now, that doesn't make him a great director after a while. Once every 7 years, in our society, whatever you think, at least there's an opportunity to be very successful.
Okay, got to take a break. I want to think about this. Governor Scott's been on my show now 14 times. For some reason, he likes me. One time I flew up, met with him face to face. The other times I've been on the phone. Here's a guy who would, like you and I, we've both been. I had an affluent upbringing, but then I was living in the ghetto later on in life, and then have come back wherever I am now, wherever that might be. But Scott, Governor Scott, can't seem to win with the ladies. Now, I don't know, understand this because most people don't know, he was in the projects as a boy. His father was a delivery guy, okay? Didn't have any money. And he came up, made himself a billionaire, and yet that's held against him. I would, from what you've said today, Scott's, he's willing. He's a father's boy. He's a daddy's boy, wasn't he? Let's talk about him and why he can't. Why the women just can't seem to warm up to Scott. Is there any way that he could be reelected? I don't know. But let's talk about that. All right. Okay. We're talking with my newfound friend Stanford Erickson, Mama's Boy Presence. Why do we keep electing him? He'll probably be sorry he ever wandered in here today with his wife because I'm not going to let this guy go. I'm going to be tenacious. I really have extreme reverence for him. 30 years as a journalist. This is the mayor who loves you, baby.